hope everyone has been doing well amidst this coronavirus epidemic. And I definitely miss seeing y'all in class, but at least this way we can discuss our final journal article reflections. My article was titled The Importance and Use of Student Self Selected Literature to Reading Engagement in an Elementary Reading Curriculum. And it was authored by Denise Johnson and Ann Blair and was published in 2003. So, one of the reasons I chose an article that focused on reading curriculum was because my first two articles mainly focused on writing curriculum. And so, the main idea of this article is it's pretty straightforward in the sense that the title summarizes the main idea for us. So, in short, the authors of this article discuss the importance of student selected literature or student choice books and reading engagement in elementary classroom context. And additionally, the authors kind of look at their topic through five different contexts. So the first context they look at their this topic through is child development, and their article excuse me. So their article references researcher Denise Olson's theory of child development. So Olson claims that children are self-seeking, self-selecting, and self-pacing organisms. And Olson believes that children will seek and select experiences that are consistent with their development level. And additionally, Denise Olson had a unique kind of yo-yo effect situation that she had found through research. Um, so, Olson said many students' reading selections move back and forth between harder and easier materials depending on their developmental purpose, and this kind of creates a yo-yo effect. And let's look at the self-selected reading in the context of book difficulty. So, this context can kind of be tricky for teachers. We want our students to be able to confidently choose their own books. We want them to be able to form their own opinions, find their favorite genres. But at the same time, we worry that are they wasting their independent reading time right now trying to read a book that is just way over their head? Or are they just kind of joking around and reading a book that we know that is way below their reading level? So in the article, it explained that children are often able to read texts that are otherwise too difficult for them if the texts are interesting. And furthermore, this was really neat to learn. So, interestingness of a text is 30 times more powerful than the readability of the text when it comes to comprehension and recall. And in fact, interestingness of a book leads to enjoyment and increases in positive attitudes towards reading by children. And in terms of independent reading time, this article emphasizes the importance of working in this independent reading time into our classrooms. I know this can sometimes seem impossible, and it really, sometimes teachers, we feel like, where do I fit this in? It's going to take away from this or this. But this article really, it explains that students really need to be provided with this reading time. And before reading this article, I always knew that student independent reading time within the classroom was important, and typically it's enjoyable for both students and teachers. But I hadn't thought about these questions that the article pointed out. So asking ourselves as teachers questions such as how many students don't have access to a collection of kids' books outside of school? And how many of these kiddos spend a majority of their time busy or in childcare programs with sports or other activities? So when we take the time to ask ourselves these questions, it's like, wow, the probability of our students being able to work in their independent reading time outside of school, especially on a Monday through Friday day, is kind of slim. So because of this, while they're in school, let's give them that time. And the article explained that independent reading time should be provided at least once every day and a minimum of 90 minutes in a school per reading day. So that is a lot. If you can't do 90, the article explained 30 minutes is enough, but we would like to be able to work in as much independent reading time as we can throughout our day. And then looking at self selected reading in the context of accountability. So the article highlights that students need to be held accountable for the choices they've made in regards to their literature selection and to their independent reading. And an interesting quote from the text: with the inclusion of self selected independent reading time, the student teacher conferences, each student is given the skills and knowledge they need to succeed. Students are able to take ownership of the reading process, and this encourages students to read more often and allows them to become master decision makers, which is a skill that's important in life. So, we need to hold ourselves as teachers accountable as well as our students. We need to teach them these skills um, that will allow them to be successful in self-selecting their text and in independent reading. And lastly, um, looking at selected reading in the context of a supportive environment. This is one of the most important contexts, I thought, in the article. So, one of the most significant needs in a classroom encouraging self selection of literature is an appropriate physical environment. So, I know personally I love to look up Pinterest boards of fun classroom reading corners and just cute ways teachers have decorated their classrooms. But the text explained that these reading environments are more than just pretty and cute little corners of our classroom. These inviting environments, um, they sorry, they allow our students to feel comfortable in their independent reading time. They feel like this is a thing that I could see myself doing at home. They aren't just sitting at their desks reading books they don't want to read. They're sitting in comfy chairs like beanbag chairs or couches. Um, it's a comfortable environment. And I thought it was cute that the text said younger students can bring a stuffed animal as a reading buddy to cuddle up and read with them. I thought that was precious. Okay, so question 2. How does the article enhance your understanding of ELA practices? And what have you learned? So, from my highlighting, you can tell I have a lot to say, so I will try to summarize best I can. So, and in all, I learned how important and complicated creating classroom libraries can be. I learned of the importance of supportive and comfortable classroom reading environments, and I was able to take an in-depth look at the North Carolina Standards for Reading. So, in terms of classroom libraries, I learned that creating a classroom library is a lot of work, especially when I think about creating a classroom library as a new teacher. So, teachers need to acquire the actual books, bookshelf, bins. They need to organize the books by reading level and genre. And also, teachers need to acquaint themselves with a wide variety of children's literature. Teachers need to understand what's the most recent and the most popular award-winning student lit books that I need to be adding to my library. What's appropriate for my students? And so, as a new teacher, this kind of felt a little overwhelming for me, and I will actually discuss that further at the end of my discussion. And then classroom reading environments, I just touched on this. But I learned that cozy and inviting environments aren't just a nice touch, but they're instead a vital piece of a student's development as a reader. And then when looking at the North Carolina State Standards for Reading, um, I learned that beginning in second grade, students are actually expected to be able to read and understand literature proficiently and independently for a sustained period of time. So I was kind of surprised to find independent reading as an actual standard. But that made me happy because I feel like a lot of times this can get pushed to the wayside. Okay, so how does this article relate to our class discussions, readings, and other classes that I've had at Queens? So, in terms of our class discussions, while I was reading my article, I found a lot of connections between our between my in-class narrative writing lesson as well as our class discussions of narrative writing. So when I was teaching my narrative writing in class lesson, I kind of touched on the special relationships that students have and develop as early as pre-K with narratives, with stories. Because narratives are some of the first pieces of literature that our students listen to, that our students watch in movies. And and because of this, these are the first stories type. This is the first genre that students are drawn to read. It makes sense. And then in terms of reading standards, um, the North Carolina reading standards, excuse me. So I wanted to point out that beginning in kindergarten, students are expected to determine central ideas or themes of a text and analyze their development, and as well as summarize a key supporting details and ideas of text. Kindergarten, you guys, that's crazy. So in class, we discussed these implications for early reading standards in terms of student reading and writing expectations. And as far as this article relating to our readings, almost all of our chapters so far and throughout the book discuss the importance of student reading in their discussions of instructional writing methods. Specifically in chapter 5, our book discusses the importance of reading logs for students in developing reading skills. So the book states that students make text to self, text to world, text to text, and text to media connections, and they evaluate part or whole of the book, often using phrases like I liked, I didn't like, opinions, and phrases or condemnations of an author's style. So this aids students in discovering their own personal reading preferences. Also, Chapter 8 on reading stories and narratives. Most of the research examining children's knowledge about stories and narratives has been applied to reading. Children's concept of story plays an important role in their ability to comprehend the stories they read. And in terms of the other courses I've taken at Queen's, my Foundations course has discussed the growth and importance of the mutual respect between teacher and student that occurs during one-on-one reading conferences. So earlier I discussed student and teacher accountability during independent reading time and during self-selected text reading time. Um, so one of the best ways for teachers to be accountable in this process is to have these one-on-one reading conferences. They don't have to be long; they can be 5 minutes. But these conferences, they make students feel special and important about sharing their opinions. And during these conferences, teachers can model their own reading preferences for the student. And additionally, my current math course at Queen's actually focuses a great deal on students' reading ability in terms of math problems. So I know that, excuse me, so math word problems are never fun for anyone really. And it's because it's not just 5 plus 2 equals 7. It's Adam had 5 apples, Susie had 2 apples. How many apples do they have in all? So that even though mathematically it's touching on the same topic, those words and the way that the problem is phrased and displayed to the students can impact their ability to be successful in math. Um, and also the tricky word problems, as students age, these math problems will continue to require even higher level reading skills. And then question 4, for my talking points. I have 3 talking points. So the first one is classroom library. As I mentioned, I was a little stressed about creating a brand new classroom library since I've never done it before. So really, I just would like to hear your thoughts and experiences with this. Pam, I know you have been a real teacher before in a school. So and I know Professor Hoyle, you're obviously a teacher. So I would love to hear, I would like to hear your details on how you acquired your library books. Do the schools provide the teachers with books? Can teachers borrow these books from the library? These are all questions that were kind of stressing me out since the text didn't go too far into detail about teachers getting these books. And the second talking point I wanted to touch on was balancing teacher guidance and student independence during the self selected independent reading time. So the text kind of contradicted itself a little bit in regards to this balance. Um, so I would again love to hear some feedback or just some suggestions for this. Um, but in my opinion, what I took away from this is that I think the best way to balance teacher intervention and while maintaining student independence would be maybe the use of the one-on-one student-teacher meetings or even the creation of classroom reading clubs. And then lastly, um, I thought that I thought this article touched on the strengthening students' intrinsic motivation through their personal choice of text and independent reading time. So, when students are given the opportunity to find their personal reading preferences, they often are able to find out what they like or dislike through the trial and error of trying or disliking different genres. So, when they are able to do this, when they're able to act this out, their academic confidence grows, not just in reading, but their general academic confidence. Um, and so does their intrinsic motivation to read. So, intrinsic motivation or internal incentives that we have when working towards a specific goal is a major reason why student self selected literature positively affects student reading engagement. And I just wanted to end my discussion. Um, I am a super intrinsic motivation advocate as opposed to extrinsic motivation. So I wanted to just touch on this last bullet. So, in general, teachers and educators should always strive to create learning opportunities and environments that procure intrinsic motivational growth, as opposed to situations that rely heavily on extrinsic or outside influences of motivation. Various research in fields of education and psych have found time and time again that intrinsic motivation is a much stronger motivator than an extrinsic motivation. So, something like a reward. If you read this book, you get a candy. No, we don't want students to read so they get a candy. We want students to read because they truly enjoy their text. And when students are able to choose their text, they're able to practice independent reading time. They're able to have discussions with their teachers, their peers about what they've read, um, and they're able to form opinions about certain genres. This really, this is a much better way. Their reading skills will grow naturally without a teacher forcing them to read. So that was it for my presentation. I look forward to hearing what your journal articles were about. And again, if you have any suggestions for classroom libraries um, and for that balance between student independence and kind of like teacher intervention during this independent time, just shoot me an email, let me know, because I am open to suggestions. All right, hope y'all have a good rest of your week.